Hello, in this video I'd like to talk a little bit about what is data. That's the game plan. So this is the first topic in my Python notes, and basically the way it works is data is when you store information, or I should say integers or numbers. Could even be pictures, could be pretty much anything that you would like the computer to store so you can do something with it at a later point in time. And when you create this data, it's going to be stored in one of two places. It's going to be stored on a fixed location like a drive. This could be a hard drive. It could be a CD for that matter, DVD I suppose. Could be a tape drive. Could be a USB drive. But it's going to be stored. And then the other place is in memory. It turns out that whenever you use a computer and you're programming it, even if the data was originally stored on the hard drives or any other device, when you go to use it, it loads it into memory before it starts using it. Now when it gets loaded off, taken off the hard drive and loaded into memory at the time you need to use it, you end up with a place to hold it in the memory chips, the RAM chips. And they use memory or RAM chips have a address where the content is held. Once you're done using it, it just clears out the space so other programs can use that same space. The memory chips, the RAM chips, are really quick. The hard drive not nearly as quick as the memory chips. So computers don't work directly off the drive. They will always load stuff into memory, work from that, and then put it back on the drive if you've made any changes. Programs actually store data on the drive in a bunch of different ways. They may store it as a simple text file. They may store it in the Windows registry. They may actually put it in some type of database. When you're looking at it, it doesn't really matter where it's at. They're just some kind of file on some kind of drive. And people get a little misled about what that means. Let's say I go through and I take the time to make a simple text file. Let's go through and make a text document. I probably shouldn't be putting it in the module here, but I'll do it for right now. Again, I put some text in there. I save my work. Now that's a text document. Now let me copy that, and I'll change this over to, that's a Python document. But wait a second, isn't it still just a text document? If I open up an idle, I'll see it just has the same code. What makes it a Python file is that the extension is associated with something. If I go through and make it a Word doc, what makes it a Word doc is that it's associated with that. Word actually has a whole bunch of additional formatting behind the scenes, so you can see it's coming in as very clear, plain text. I'm not getting cool formatting features and the like. If I were to add them, though, it would start changing things. That's because Word isn't strictly just a simple text file. It's got text and some binary formatting in it. You can see they got a bunch of goodies in here that kind of help me. I mean, it's the same, essentially it's the same content. It's just that all this additional formatting structure goes along with it. So your files basically come down to some form of just plain text or some form of binary file. Those are your two basic forms. Now, it doesn't really matter which format it's in. When you actually go to use it, even when I'm opening up in Word, it loads it in memory. So it's always going to load it in memory and work with it. Once it's loaded in memory, then I can make changes to it. Now this is just a plain old text Word doc or text document. If I don't hit save, it won't make the changes go out of memory and onto the hard drive. So that is the nature of data. And data can be stored in all kinds of different files. In the Windows registry, they have a set of DAT files, DAT files, that store that. In a case of a database like Microsoft SQL Server, they have an MDF file. In the case of Access, they have a MDB file, or let's see, the new one is ACCDB, I think it is. Even programs as simple as Calculator actually goes through and pulls information into memory. In Calculator, you don't really open up a file first, but you could save the data later on and use it. But in Calculator, you basically just give it a couple numbers, you do something, it prints on the screen, and you close it. Sometimes you just want to do something in memory temporarily and close it down. In fact, our assignment this week is going to be doing something very much like that. Now, when you load data into memory, either from a stored data file of some type, or just data that you collect from the user by using an input command saying, what would you like to put in here? You need to actually tell the computer what type of data is going to be loaded. The reason for this is in the memory chips, the computer has to store this information, so it needs two things to know two things. Those two things are how big is this data and what type is this data. So the computer needs to have this information so it can reserve the space to hold it. And this is referred to as a data type. A data type identifies things like an integer would be stored under 4 bytes of space. A decimal typically is stored under like 8 bytes of space. Now, depending on which language you're using, and the software that interprets that language, like the Python interpreter that we installed last week, the size of the data types may vary. Some older software languages, an integer may be 2 bytes. Maybe they don't have a decimal data type, but they have a floating point data type. And it's, I don't know, 4 bytes or maybe 16 bytes, who knows. It's really up to the people that make the interpreter. But the trick is that the computer needs to know how much space to set aside for the data coming in. And this leads us to the concept of data types. When you pull the information into memory, the data can either be changed while the program is running, or it can be locked down so that it doesn't change while the computer is running. And that leads us to the concept of variables and constants. In this video, though, we just took a look at what is the nature of data, and hopefully this gave you some idea about that topic. Next on the list, let's talk about variables and constants, what they represent, and how they are used. I'll see you then.